Daniel said. "Why is this gone?" His voice cracked as the glow of the monitor revealed an empty inbox. Only minutes earlier, the evidence had been there. Emails that could destroy the company's polished facade. The fluorescent office lights hummed, but the silence pressed harder. He tapped refresh again, but the screen mocked him with emptiness. Panic surged through his chest, each heartbeat louder than the keystrokes. The chair felt like a trap, the walls like watchtowers. He whispered, "They know." Outside, the city still breathed in neon pulses, but here, time froze. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes, scanning for traces of what once was proof. He thought of his family, of promises made, and of the cost of silence. His palms sweated on the keyboard. It was not just deletion, it was erasure. The machine wasn't broken. Someone had been watching. Daniel sat frozen, the cursor blinking on the barren inbox like a taunt. His thoughts spiraled. Had he misfiled the emails, or had someone reached inside his account? He muttered, "This can't be real." He leaned forward, heart pounding as he opened subfolders, trash, archives, all empty. Not one trace remained. Each click deepened the certainty. This was no glitch. He felt the heat of paranoia crawl across his skin, imagining eyes on him from unseen corners. The silence of the office stretched unbearably, broken only by the hum of machines. He whispered again, "They know." He rubbed his temples, replaying the memory of the incriminating thread. Numbers that didn't add up, contracts with shadows, signatures that screamed fraud. They had been right there, undeniable. Now, gone. Daniel whispered, "They wiped me clean." His stomach turned as he realized what it meant. Someone with power had access. Someone who had been waiting. He pushed his chair back, the screech echoing too loud in the stillness. The thought stabbed deep. If they could erase proof, what could they do to him? Daniel reached for his phone, hands trembling. He scrolled through contacts, hovering over names of allies who once promised support. His thumb froze. Could he trust them? Or were they already compromised? The paranoia bled into every thought. He whispered, "If I call, they'll know." Sweat beaded down his temple. He stared at the blank inbox, the void where his courage had once been. The sound of a distant door closing somewhere in the building made his breath hitch. He muttered, "I'm not alone." The hallway creaked, as if the building itself was listening. Daniel slid the phone onto the desk and stood, legs unsteady. He whispered, "I need to get out." His eyes darted to the exit sign, glowing faint red, at the end of the corridor. For a moment, he felt like prey cornered in a cage. His heartbeat drummed in his ears as he gathered the scattered papers, stuffing them into a folder with shaky hands. He muttered, "They won't erase me." The words felt hollow, but saying them gave him one breath of courage. Daniel sat in his kitchen, staring at the untouched coffee mug. The hum of the refrigerator was louder than his thoughts, yet his mind raced. Emily said, "You didn't sleep again, did you?" Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. He forced a smile, shaking his head. The truth clung to him, heavy as chains. She reached for his hand, her warmth grounding him for a moment. He thought of the files erased, of how easily they could erase him too. He whispered, "I can't stop now." Emily's eyes glistened, filled with fear and unspoken worry. Emily said, "They're changing you." Her voice trembled as she squeezed his fingers. Daniel shook his head, insisting, "It's not me, it's them." The words cracked under pressure. He thought of their daughter upstairs, asleep in a world free from corporate shadows. His chest tightened at the thought of exposing her to danger. Emily's silence spoke louder than words, her eyes begging him to let go. He looked away, gripping the mug, whispering, "If I don't do this, no one will." Daniel rose from the table, pacing across the kitchen floor. He muttered, "They're covering tracks, deleting everything." Emily's voice cracked as she said, "Then stop chasing them before they erase you too." Her words echoed like thunder in his head. He pressed his palms against the counter, staring at the tiled wall. He wanted to scream but only managed to whisper, "It's too late." The weight of truth pressed down like stone. He could already feel the noose tightening. Later that night, Daniel sat at his daughter's bedside, watching her sleep. The innocence in her face crushed him with guilt. He whispered, "I'm doing this for you." He adjusted the blanket gently, careful not to wake her. His thoughts drifted back to the erased emails, the hollow inbox that confirmed his isolation. The glow of a nightlight painted the room in warm amber, yet his heart felt frozen. He wondered how long he could keep this world separate from hers. Emily stood at the doorway, watching silently as Daniel whispered to their child. Her voice broke the silence. "She needs you safe, not destroyed." Daniel turned, eyes heavy with exhaustion and determination. He said, "If I walk away, they win." The words felt final, like a vow. Emily crossed her arms, torn between love and fear. She whispered, "And if you stay, we lose you." The house was quiet, yet the tension was louder than thunder. Daniel walked into the office the next morning, the sharp echo of his footsteps louder than it should have been. Heads turned briefly before snapping back to screens, conversations cut short mid-sentence. The air carried an invisible weight, as if the building itself knew. Mark, his co-worker, forced a half smile and said, "Morning," but his tone wavered like a cracked mirror. Daniel muttered back, "Yeah," his voice low, as though speaking too loudly might trigger alarms. He sat at his desk, eyes flicking to his inbox. Still empty. The evidence was gone, erased clean. He looked around and caught reflections of glowing screens in glass dividers, coworkers hiding behind them like shields. No one dared meet his gaze. Their silence was louder than words, and he felt himself drowning in it. He whispered under his breath, "They've been warned." "I'm already marked." Daniel slid into his chair and opened the drawer, hands shaking as he pushed aside pens and files. Beneath the clutter, hidden under reports, he found shredded fragments of paper. Jagged edges, words barely visible, contracts, signatures, numbers. His pulse quickened, the fragments vibrating in his grip like live wires. He whispered, "They're cleaning house." A shadow stretched across his desk. Richard, his manager, leaned in with a smile carved too perfectly. Everything all right, Daniel?" His tone was smooth, but his eyes sliced sharp as glass. Daniel forced a nod, swallowing the panic clawing at his throat. "Just catching up." The words tasted like ash. Richard's smile lingered, thin and insincere, like a knife hidden behind velvet. The silence after hung heavy, as if the entire room paused to listen. Richard leaned closer, close enough for Daniel to smell cologne masking something colder. His voice lowered into a warning disguised as advice. "We all need to be careful these days. Don't want to make mistakes." Daniel's body stiffened, his grip tightening on the shredded pieces. He nodded quickly, as if agreeing could buy him safety. Richard's eyes lingered for a moment longer before he stood upright, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate calm. His polished shoes clicked against the floor as he walked away, each step a hammer blow to Daniel's chest. Daniel exhaled shakily, his breath trembling like glass about to shatter. He glanced at the scraps in his hand, the ink bleeding through torn edges. They felt heavier than steel, a death warrant clutched in trembling fingers. He whispered to himself, "They're onto me. They've been onto me all along." At lunch, Daniel sat alone in the cafeteria, tray untouched, the smell of food curdling his stomach. Around him, clusters of coworkers murmured, conversations punctuated with glances in his direction. Two employees whispered near the vending machine, their eyes darting to him before quickly shifting away. Daniel stabbed at the meal with a fork, appetite lost in the haze of suspicion. His phone buzzed on the table. One message. Anonymous. "Stop digging." His blood ran cold as he scanned the room. Every face blurred into the same mask of indifference, yet he felt their eyes, their judgment, their silence. He muttered, "They're everywhere." The hum of the cafeteria seemed to grow louder, oppressive, a storm contained within four walls. The walls themselves felt closer, suffocating, pressing him into a corner of fear he couldn't escape. That night, Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling, his body trembling despite the still air. The faint moonlight through the blinds carved shadows across the room like prison bars. Emily whispered, "You were shaking." Her voice was tender but laced with fear. He turned his head slowly, eyes hollow, and said, "They're watching everything." The words cut into the silence like broken glass. She reached for his hand, desperate to hold him steady, but he pulled away, afraid his fear would poison her too. He whispered, "If I disappear, promise me you'll protect her." Emily's breath caught in her throat, the unspoken terror clear in her eyes. The house was quiet, yet every corner felt alive with unseen watchers. Daniel shut his eyes, but his mind stayed wide open, replaying the same silent warning. Sleep never came. Daniel sat stiffly in the dim conference room, the hum of the projector filling the silence between his shallow breaths. Mark slid into the chair beside him, close enough for their shoulders to almost touch. His voice was low, urgent, trembling at the edges. "You can't keep this up." Daniel's head snapped toward him, disbelief hardening into anger. "You know what they're doing," he hissed. His words carried more fear than conviction. Mark's jaw tightened, eyes fixed on the table. The projector flickered, throwing lifeless charts and corporate slogans across the wall, a veil hiding corruption. Daniel whispered, "You've seen it too." Finally, Mark's eyes lifted, glistening with something Daniel couldn't name: shame, fear, betrayal. His whisper was colder than the air conditioning. "I told them you wouldn't stop." Daniel froze. It was no rumor now. Betrayal had a voice, a face, and it sat inches away, cloaked in false friendship. Daniel's chest constricted, a tide of betrayal flooding his veins. "You told them," he whispered, barely able to form the words. Mark leaned closer, his voice sharp with panic, eyes darting toward the others in the room. "They gave me no choice. You were dragging me down with you." Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. The man he trusted most had turned informant. He muttered, "We were in this together." The crack in his voice betrayed the wound no one could see. Mark said nothing, lips pressed thin, silence more brutal than any confession. Around them, colleagues shuffled papers, blind to the storm gathering between two men. Daniel dug his nails into his palms beneath the desk, desperate to keep from trembling. The betrayal was worse than the erasure of proof. It was proof that trust itself had been erased. Later that afternoon, Daniel opened his locker in the storage room, the metallic door creaking like a warning. Inside, a sealed envelope waited, his name scrawled across it in bold black ink. His pulse thundered as he tore it open, paper trembling in his hands. Inside were copies of the very emails he thought erased, their headers intact, stamped with a red confidential. Clipped to them was a single note, typed in cold letters, "You've been warned." His stomach dropped. This wasn't rescue, it was bait. He whispered, "They wanted me to find this." The fluorescent light above flickered erratically, shadows jerking along the walls like silent watchers. He realized now the emails weren't erased at all. They were recrafted, a weapon sharpened against him. The trap had been sprung, and his fingerprints were all over the evidence. Daniel stumbled into the restroom, locking the door with trembling hands. He staggered toward the mirror, his reflection pale, sweat shining under sterile lights. He muttered, "It's a setup." The tiled walls bounced his voice back at him, taunting. He splashed cold water on his face, but the dread clung like a second skin. The envelope sat on the counter, papers fanned out like an execution order. Emily's voice echoed in his memory, "They'll crush you before they ever fall." He gripped the sink until his knuckles blanched, the porcelain threatening to crack beneath the strain. His whisper came ragged, "They're building a case against me." His fear curdled into anger, but even that spark felt fragile, a candle in the endless dark. The restroom was silent, but Daniel swore he could hear breathing behind the walls. That night, Daniel sat motionless in his car outside the office, rain hammering against the windshield like gunfire. Neon lights bled through the storm, distorting the world into shifting shadows. On the passenger seat, the envelope glowed faintly in the streetlight, its weight unbearable. Daniel whispered, "It was never about erasing proof. It's about framing me." His fists clenched the steering wheel until pain shot up his arms. He saw headlines in his mind, accusations designed to shred his name, while the guilty walked free. He pictured Emily's tearful eyes, his daughter's small hand slipping from his, Mark's look of cowardice across the conference table. Betrayal burned sharper than fear, searing into his chest. The rain blurred the city into a smear of colorless lies. He whispered again, louder this time, "They're going to bury me alive." And for the first time, he almost believed it. The boardroom buzzed with polished laughter as executives shuffled papers, but Daniel's chest thundered louder than their chatter. He placed the folder on the table, his hands shaking. "You all need to see this," he said, voice unsteady but sharp. Richard raised an eyebrow, smile polite and dangerous. "Daniel, this isn't the time." Daniel's voice cracked into anger. "It's exactly the time." He opened the folder, revealing copies of contracts and shredded remnants pieced together. The air shifted, laughter dying into silence. He said, "You've been lying, hiding fraud, erasing truth." Richard's jaw tightened, but Daniel pressed on. "Not anymore." His words filled the room like fire catching dry paper. Richard stood slowly, smile fading into something colder. "These accusations are reckless," he said, voice carrying the weight of authority. Daniel's throat tightened, but he forced his words. "I have evidence. Numbers don't vanish unless someone makes them vanish." Gasps rippled as he spread documents across the polished wood. A woman on the board whispered, "Is this real?" Richard's gaze cut through her, then snapped back to Daniel. "You're finished." Daniel met his stare, pulse hammering. "I'm finished only if I stay quiet. And I won't." His words rang against the glass walls like a crack in stone, daring anyone to deny them. Mark sat at the far end, avoiding Daniel's eyes. Daniel turned toward him, betrayal boiling. "Tell them, Mark," he demanded. Mark shifted in his seat, sweat shining on his forehead. "You saw the same files I did. You know this is true." Mark shook his head, voice trembling. "I can't." His refusal sliced through Daniel, sharper than Richard's threats. "You sold me out," Daniel muttered, bitterness choking him. Mark whispered, "I had to survive." The boardroom erupted into murmurs, but Daniel's voice rose above them, raw and desperate. "Survive? You're helping bury the truth alive." His words echoed like a verdict, his fury undeniable. Richard slammed his hand against the table, the crack jolting the room into silence. "Enough," he barked. His voice dripped venom, mask gone. "Do you think anyone will believe you? We control the narrative." Daniel's fists tightened. "Not anymore. I've sent files outside this building. The truth is already moving." Gasps broke the stillness, panic flashing across faces. Richard's glare burned with fury. "You just ended your career." Daniel met his eyes, standing taller than his fear. "I don't care about my career. I care about what's right." The words felt like chains breaking, his voice steadier than it had ever been. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Daniel felt the weight of eyes on him, fear, admiration, contempt all tangled together. He gathered the scattered papers, his voice quiet but steady. "Do whatever you want to me. The truth is already out." Richard's smirk flickered, faltering for the first time. Daniel turned toward the door, each step echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. Mark called after him softly, "Daniel." But the name carried no loyalty, only regret. Daniel didn't look back. The room was behind him, but the firestorm he unleashed was only beginning. The next morning, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, newspapers spread before him. Headlines screamed corruption, the company's name plastered in bold. He traced the letters with trembling fingers, whispering, "It's out." Emily stood across from him, arms folded, eyes filled with both pride and fear. She said, "You did it, but at what cost?" Daniel's reflection in the window looked older, worn down by nights without sleep. He thought of the boardroom, of Richard's glare, of Mark's silence. He whispered, "They'll come for me now." Emily reached for his hand, her voice breaking. "And we'll face it together." Daniel walked past the office building, now surrounded by news vans and flashing cameras. Reporters shouted questions, their microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Did you leak the documents? Are you a hero or a traitor?" He kept his head down, pulling his coat tighter. The company's logo loomed above him, tarnished by scandal yet still towering. His stomach turned at the sight. He muttered, "They'll survive this, even if I don't." The crowd surged, flashes blinding him. For every voice that cheered, another spat his name like venom. His truth was out there, but control of the story slipped through his grasp. At home, Daniel watched a televised debate. Commentators argued over him like he wasn't even human. "He's brave," one declared. "He's reckless," another spat. His daughter peeked from behind the couch, whispering, "Daddy, why are they saying your name?" Daniel muted the TV, heart cracking at her question. He said softly, "Because I told the truth." Emily hugged their daughter tight, eyes filled with sorrow. The glow of the screen painted Daniel in cold blue light, casting him as both savior and criminal in the world's eyes. He sat in silence, trapped between justice and destruction. Daniel stood outside in the rain, meeting a journalist by a dimly lit cafe. Sarah, a sharp-eyed woman with notepad in hand, said, "You've changed the game, but they'll spin it back on you." Daniel nodded, water dripping from his hair, coat soaked. "I don't care how they spin it, people needed to know." Sarah scribbled, her gaze calculating, more interested in the story than the man before her. She said, "Truth has a cost. Are you ready to pay it?" Daniel looked past her to the streetlights flickering in the storm. He whispered, "I've already started." Later that night, Daniel sat on his porch, staring at the quiet street. The world felt both heavier and strangely empty. Emily brought him a blanket, wrapping it around his shoulders. She whispered, "We'll get through this somehow." Daniel nodded, but said nothing, eyes fixed on the shadows stretching under the streetlight. His phone buzzed beside him. Unknown number, no message. He turned it over, pulse quickening. He whispered to himself, "This isn't over." The night air was cold, but inside him burned a fire that would never dim, even if it consumed everything he loved. Daniel walked through the city at dawn, streets slick from last night's rain. The world seemed indifferent, cars rushing, neon signs still glowing faintly. His face was drawn, shoulders hunched under a weight no one else could see. He thought of the files, the betrayal, the storm he unleashed. Strangers brushed past, unaware of the man who cracked a giant. He whispered, "They'll rebuild, but I'll never be the same." The sun rose slowly, casting light on towers of glass that had tried to crush him. He lifted his gaze, hollow yet unbroken, and kept walking. At home, Emily sat across from him at the kitchen table, silence pressing heavier than words. She finally said, "You've done something that can't be undone." Daniel nodded, eyes fixed on his coffee, untouched. "I know," he whispered. His daughter's laughter drifted faintly from the other room, a sound both healing and piercing. Emily reached out, covering his hand. "We still need you here," she said. Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm here," he promised, though deep down he wondered how much of him was left. The truth had freed him, but it had also hollowed him. Later that week, Daniel stood outside the courthouse, reporters swarming again. Questions flew like arrows. "Do you regret it? Was it worth the price?" He kept his gaze steady, lips pressed tight. A young journalist pushed forward, asking, "Do you believe you'll win?" Daniel paused, exhaled slowly and said, "Winning isn't the point. The truth is." His words cut through the noise, recorded, repeated, broadcast to millions. He turned and walked inside, leaving cameras flashing in his wake. Each step felt like surrender and defiance, entwined the path of a man who knew the cost but refused to retreat. That night, Daniel sat alone in his study, desk lamp casting a pool of yellow light on scattered documents. The rest of the house was asleep, silence broken only by the ticking clock. He wrote in a notebook, his handwriting uneven but urgent. "If this is the end, let it mean something," he murmured. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but his hand kept moving, leaving behind a record no one could erase. He closed the notebook gently, sliding it into a drawer. He whispered, "At least my voice won't vanish." The lamp flickered once, plunging him briefly into shadow. The phone rang just past midnight, shattering the silence. Daniel froze, staring at the glowing screen. Unknown number. Emily stirred upstairs, unaware. He let it ring, each tone louder than the last, echoing like a countdown. When it stopped, the silence was worse. He whispered into the empty room, "It was worth it." His words hung in the air, fragile, but unshakable. The house remained still, shadows stretching across the walls. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, carrying a warning or a promise. Daniel closed his eyes, a single tear tracing down his cheek. The story wasn't over, but his part had been written in fire.